Clara Whitfield had always lived her life in a small and careful way. It's the kind of way that made people trust her, admire her, and depend on her. She was the schoolmarm of Cedar Grove, a town so small that almost everyone knew everyone else's routines. People respected Clara for her steady nature, her patience with children, and her gentle smile that lifted the day of anyone who crossed her path. But while the town saw her as calm and collected, few ever noticed the quiet longing that lived behind her eyes. A longing Clara herself tried not to acknowledge too often. Her days were filled with chalk dust, children's voices, and the familiar sound of pages turning. She loved her students and believed deeply in her work, but routine had become a kind of soft cage. Every morning she unlocked the schoolhouse door, and every evening she locked it behind her, walking back to her little house just a few streets away. Nothing terrible ever happened in her life, but nothing surprising did either. She had grown used to the comfort of predictability, even when it left her heart feeling emptier than she wished to admit. Yet there was one part of her routine that stirred something inside her, something warm, unsteady, and a little frightening. Once a month, a cowboy named Jack Renshaw came to the school to deliver hay for the small barn near the playground. The school kept a pair of old ponies for the children to ride on special days. And though Clara was the teacher, she also oversaw simple things like feed deliveries. It wasn't part of her job description. But the town was small, and everyone wore a few extra hats. Jack would arrive early in the morning, or sometimes just before noon. Clara never asked him to come at a certain time. He simply showed up when his ranch duties allowed it. The moment she heard the low rumble of his truck outside, she felt a little flutter in her stomach, the kind she quickly tried to silence before anyone noticed. Jack never came inside the classroom unless she waved him in to sign the receipt, so usually she watched him through the window while he worked. She pretended not to. But her eyes always drifted toward the barn when she knew he was there. Jack was a man who moved with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't demand attention yet drew it all the same. He didn't speak more than necessary, but his voice carried a warmth that made people feel safe. He was tall, broad-shouldered from years of hard work, and his presence felt steady like the land he worked on. And though Clara never said it out loud, she found herself thinking about him long after he drove away. To anyone else, their exchanges were simple and polite. He would tip his hat. She would offer a small smile. He would ask about the school. She would ask about the ranch. They never spoke long enough for anyone to call it a friendship. Yet there was something in those brief moments that made Clara's day feel brighter, even if she tried her best to keep her emotions hidden behind professionalism. Jack, on his part, had noticed Clara from the very first day he walked into the schoolyard. At first, she seemed like any other teacher, kind, organized, and easy to talk to. But as the months passed, he realized there was something gentle and strong about her, something that made him pay closer attention than he intended. Even in her quiet way, she carried a presence that made people feel welcomed. She didn't try to impress anyone. Maybe that was what impressed him the most. He often caught small details most people missed. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way she leaned slightly forward when listening to children, making them feel heard. The way she laughed softly under her breath when a child said something unexpectedly honest. And though Clara believed she kept her feelings to herself, Jack could sense a shy warmth in her smile whenever their eyes met. Still, nothing ever moved beyond polite conversation. Clara would never allow herself to step outside the careful boundaries she had built around her personal life. She feared that hoping for more would only lead to disappointment. She had never been someone who chased after romance. Instead, she waited, telling herself that life would eventually bring something her way. But waiting often turned into years of silence. And Clara had grown used to expecting little. The truth she never admitted was that she felt unsure of herself when it came to matters of the heart. She wasn't bold like some women in town who flirted easily. She didn't have the kind of confidence that shouted across a room. She was soft-spoken and thoughtful. And sometimes she wondered if anyone would ever see past her reserved nature. And yet Jack had seen something. Maybe not everything, but enough to know she had a warm heart beneath her calm exterior. He never teased her or tried to break her quietness. Instead, he matched it with his own gentle manner. Their conversations were simple, whether school events, ranch work, but each tiny exchange held more meaning than either admitted. It was as if both of them understood something unspoken, something delicate that needed time. Clara often found herself thinking back to those brief moments after he left, replaying their conversations in her mind longer than she should. She never called him. She barely even waved first. Her feelings embarrassed her because she didn't know what to do with them, and she worried about appearing too forward. She convinced herself that Jack probably saw her the same way everyone else did. Reliable, polite, and easy to forget. But she was wrong. Jack noticed everything. He noticed when her cheeks warmed slightly, when he complimented her work with the children. He noticed the way her voice softened when she talked to him, as if she forgot for a moment to guard herself. He noticed how she held her books close when she walked outside to greet him, as if the simple act of standing near him made her feel both brave and shy. Sometimes Jack wanted to say more, but he wasn't sure how to approach someone as gentle as Clara without overwhelming her. He felt she needed someone who respected her pace, someone who understood that her silence wasn't coldness, but carefulness. And though he rarely showed it, Jack admired her deeply for that. Meanwhile, Clara's quiet longing grew, even though she tried to ignore it. At night, while reading in her small living room, she sometimes wondered if Jack ever thought of her at all. She would gently scold herself for daydreaming and remind herself that life wasn't a storybook. Still, when sleep finally came, it often carried with it soft images of the cowboy who visited the school once a month. Cedar Grove remained unaware of this silent connection forming between the schoolmarm and the cowboy. To the outside world, everything looked ordinary. Clara still taught her lessons with dedication. Jack still worked on the ranch. But beneath the surface of their simple routines, something quiet and hopeful was slowly growing. Clara didn't know what would happen next. She didn't dare imagine too much. All she knew was this. Every time she heard the rumble of Jack's truck approaching the schoolyard, her heart stirred in a way she couldn't control, a way that made her believe just a little that life still held moments of unexpected warmth. And though she never dared to call him, her gentle presence, her kindness, and her quiet beauty spoke louder than she realized. Even from a distance, they called out to him. Jack Renshaw had always been a man who noticed the small details of life. He didn't talk much, but he paid attention. Years of working on his family's ranch taught him that quiet things often carried the most, meaning the way a horse flicked its ears before a storm, the way the wind changed direction before rain, the way people spoke with their eyes even when they used very few words. And Clara Whitfield, the schoolmarm of Cedar Grove, was the quietest, most meaningful part of his month. Jack never expected that a simple hay delivery could become something he looked forward to. Yet that was exactly what happened. Every time he saw the schoolhouse on the hill with its white paint and red door, his heartbeat felt just a little different. Not fast, just full. He didn't talk about it with anyone, not even his best friend on the ranch. Jack wasn't the type to share feelings easily. He kept them tucked away like letters stored in a drawer, waiting for the right time to read them again. What first caught his attention about Clara wasn't her appearance, though he found her gentle presence naturally beautiful. It was the way she carried herself with calm confidence. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't raise her voice to be heard. She simply existed in a way that made the world around her feel softer. He saw the patience in her eyes when she spoke to the children. He saw the way she smiled quietly to herself when a student finally understood a difficult lesson. She was someone who put her heart into the world without asking for anything back, and Jack admired that more than he could ever say. The townspeople often joked with Jack. They liked to tease him about being slow when it came to romance. "You're hardworking, but you don't chase after anyone," they would say. Jack just laughed it off. He wasn't interested in chasing anyone who wasn't meant for him. Until he met Clara, he hadn't felt drawn to anyone in years. People assumed he was uninterested in settling down, but that wasn't true. Jack simply believed that the right connection shouldn't feel rushed or forced. And Clara, with her soft voice and thoughtful eyes, never felt rushed or forced to him. But even though he sensed something warm between them, he didn't know how to move closer without startling her. Clara kept a certain distance, not cold, but cautious. She seemed like someone who had built her life with careful steps, always making sure she didn't take a wrong one. Jack respected that. He admired that. But he also wondered about the loneliness he sometimes saw hidden behind her smile. One afternoon, while Jack was loading hay onto his truck after a long morning, an older ranch hand named Tom noticed him taking a moment to breathe deeply before heading toward the school. Tom raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Heading to see the schoolmarm?" he asked playfully. Jack looked at him with a calm expression. "Just doing my delivery," he replied, though the slight warmth in his ears betrayed him. Tom chuckled. "Sure, and I only go to the bakery because I like the smell of bread." Jack shook his head, but he couldn't help smiling under his breath. He might not talk openly about Clara, but he wasn't fooling everyone. Still, teasing didn't bother him. What did bother him was the fear that he might say something too bold and make Clara uncomfortable. She wasn't like the other women in town who laughed loudly and flirted easily. Clara was gentle. She opened up slowly. Jack felt he had to approach her in a way that respected her quiet nature. When he arrived at the school that day, he saw her standing outside, guiding a small group of children as they lined up to go indoors after recess. Her voice was steady and soft, and the children listened to her without complaint. Jack leaned against his truck for a moment, just watching her work with ease. When the children went inside, Clara noticed him and walked over. "Good afternoon, Jack," she said, brushing a piece of hair behind her ear. "You're a little early today." He nodded. "Got the chores done quicker than usual?" There was a short pause, not awkward, just gentle before. Clara smiled. "The ponies will be happy. They're eating more lately. The children are giving them too many apples." Jack chuckled softly. "Sounds like they're spoiled." Clara lifted her eyebrows in mock seriousness. "Very spoiled." They shared a moment of easy laughter, the kind that seemed simple on the outside, but warmed Jack's chest in a quiet way. He saw her cheeks grow slightly pink, but she didn't look away. That small sign of comfort meant more to him than many words ever could. He wanted to say more. Every time he stood near her, he felt the urge to ask her deeper questions. What do you do after school? Do you read before bed? Do you get lonely? Do you ever wish someone would walk you home? But he held back, not wanting to push too far, too soon. Instead, he helped her carry a few boxes into the school. Clara tried to insist she could do it herself, but he shook his head gently. "Let me," he said. "No trouble." Inside, Clara walked a little ahead of him, and Jack noticed how she moved with quiet confidence. She wasn't bold, but she held herself with dignity. He also noticed the small little details, the slight lift of her shoulders when she relaxed. The way her hands brushed lightly over the papers on her desk, as though arranging them, brought her comfort. These things, though ordinary, made her feel real to him. Not just a figure in the town, but someone with a whole world inside her. As he set the boxes down, Clara thanked him with that warm smile she rarely gave to anyone else. "You're always very helpful," she said softly. Jack shrugged lightly. "You work hard too." Her eyes softened as though the simple acknowledgement meant more than he intended. After he left, Clara stood by the window for a moment, watching him drive away. She wondered if it meant anything that he always stayed a little longer than necessary. She wondered if he noticed her as much as she noticed him. But then, she reminded herself not to think too deeply. She didn't want to create stories in her mind that had no place in real life. But Jack did notice. He noticed everything. The way her smile grew a little more confident each month. The way she seemed to relax slightly around him. The way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her students. And every time he left the schoolyard, he found himself thinking about her more than he expected. More than he admitted. Sometimes he imagined himself walking into the school on a day that wasn't a delivery day, just to say hello. But he didn't want to risk making her uncomfortable. He felt that she needed someone who wouldn't rush her or expect too much too quickly. He understood her carefulness because he had his own. Life had taught him that people could be gentle in a way that made them cautious. And Clara, he sensed, was gentle in that way. Over the next few months, Jack began finding small, natural reasons to stop by the school more often. He didn't make it obvious, and Clara never questioned it. He might bring an extra bale of hay or check on the ponies if he heard a storm was coming. Each visit was short, but each one made the connection between them a little stronger. Clara, though shy, began to feel comfortable around him in a way she didn't feel with others. She started using a more relaxed tone when she talked to him. She let her laughter come more freely, and Jack noticed these changes with a quiet kind of happiness that he kept tucked deep inside still. Despite these warm moments, they were both moving slowly, softly, like two people stepping toward the same place but afraid to break. The fragile bridge forming between them. Jack didn't know when or how things might change between them, but he carried a quiet hope every time he saw her. And even though she didn't dare show it, Clara carried that same hope too, hidden. Behind gentle smiles and soft glances she never fully explained. Neither one of them rushed. They didn't need to. Something was growing between them, something genuine, something steady. And in their own simple, careful way, both of them felt it. The storm arrived earlier than anyone expected. It was one of those summer storms that seemed to rise from nowhere, turning a warm afternoon into a sky full of gray clouds and rolling thunder. Clara Whitfield didn't notice at first. She was too busy sitting at her desk, grading a stack of essays her students had written. The classroom was quiet, the kind of quiet she usually enjoyed. But that day, it felt heavier than usual. She had stayed behind after school because she wanted to finish her work before the next morning. She also didn't feel quite ready to return to her empty house. Sometimes the silence at home felt too still, too sharp, especially after a long day of lively voices. The schoolhouse, with its old wooden floors and familiar desks, felt warmer to her heart than her own living room. As she worked, the lights flickered once. Clara looked up, frowning slightly. She listened. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, followed by the sound of wind brushing against the windows. She walked to the classroom door and looked outside. Thick clouds covered the sky, and the wind was picking up. The branches of the tall oak tree near the playground swayed back and forth. Clara's stomach tightened. She had always been uneasy about storms. She wasn't afraid of them exactly, but the sudden flashes of light and unpredictable rumbling made her anxious. Driving home in weather like this was something she avoided whenever she could. She stood at the classroom doorway for a long moment, uncertain whether to leave or stay. She told herself she should be brave. She told herself she was an adult, and adults didn't let storms scare them. But her hands still trembled slightly as she shut the door and returned to her desk. She had just picked up her pen again when she heard the muffled sound of a truck pulling into the schoolyard. It wasn't loud, just a familiar, steady hum like she had heard many times before. Her heart lifted before her mind even recognized why. There was only one person she knew who drove a truck that sounded like that. Jack Renshaw. Outside. Jack stepped out of his truck and looked up at the sky. The clouds were dark, and the rain would start any moment. He had been on his way to check on one of the fences near the edge of his ranch when he spotted the schoolhouse lights. At first, he drove past without thinking much of it. But something made him slow down and glance back. He saw Clara's car parked near the gate. He glanced at the sky again. The storm was building quickly, and the roads out of town often flooded during heavy rain. The thought of Clara trying to drive home in that weather didn't sit right with him. Without a second thought, he turned his truck around and pulled into the schoolyard. Jack walked toward the schoolhouse with quick, purposeful steps. The wind pushed against him, tugging at his shirt and hat. He reached the door and knocked, gently inside the classroom. Clara jumped a little at the sound. She wasn't expecting anyone at that hour. When she opened the door, her breath caught for a moment. Jack stood there, rain already dotting his shoulders, his expression calm but concerned. "Evening, Clara," he said softly. "Saw your car out front? Thought I'd check if you were all right?" Clara felt her heart warm at his thoughtfulness. She tried to speak, but the words didn't come out right at first. Finally, she managed a small "thank you." "I didn't realize the storm would come this fast." He nodded. "They tend to sneak up in summer. Roads might get rough soon." Clara looked past him at the sky. A flash of lightning lit up the clouds, followed by a low rumble that made her flinch ever so slightly. Jack noticed the way her fingers curled around the doorframe. "You okay?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "Storms just make me a little nervous. Jack's expression softened, not pitying, just understanding. "Mind if I wait here with you until it passes?" he asked. "No sense driving in a storm if you don't have to." Clara stepped aside. "Please." "Yes. That would make me feel better." He walked inside, wiping a bit of rain from his hat before setting it down. The classroom was warm compared to the wind outside, and the soft yellow glow from the lamps made it feel cozy despite the storm. Clara returned to her desk and tried to focus on her papers.
Yes.
But it was impossible with Jack nearby. He moved with a natural ease, sitting in one of the student desks. Leaning back slightly as he watched the rain through the window, the wind picked up, making the branches sway harder. Another bolt of lightning cracked across the sky, and Clara's shoulders stiffened. Jack's voice came softly, steady as ever. "You know, when I was younger, storms scared me too." Clara turned to look at him, surprised. "They did?" "Sure," he replied with a small smile. "The sound felt too big for the world I lived in. Took me years to get used to it." "Still not fond of them?" His honesty eased her tension. She slowly relaxed her grip on the pen she had been squeezing. They fell into gentle conversation, nothing too deep at first. Just comfortable small talk. But as the storm outside grew stronger, their words softened and deepened naturally. Clara talked about her students, how they struggled with writing but had big imaginations. Jack listened intently, nodding in all the right places, asking questions that made her smile. Then he shared stories from the ranch, the long mornings, the unexpected challenges. The simple joys. Clara found herself laughing more than she expected, and every time she did, Jack's eyes lit up as though the sound meant something special to him. For the first time, Clara let her guard down just a little more as the storm continued. She noticed something she had never allowed herself to see before: stillness in Jack that made her feel safe. His presence didn't take up space. It filled it gently, like a warm blanket on a cold night. At one point, the lights flickered again, and Clara instinctively looked toward Jack. He didn't say a word, but his eyes met hers with a steady calm that grounded her more than any lamp could. "Thank you for staying," she said quietly. Jack shrugged, but there was warmth in his voice. "Wouldn't feel right leaving you to face this alone." That simple sentence touched her in a way she didn't expect. She wasn't used to someone choosing to stay with her. Most of her life she had learned to manage things by herself. Her work, her worries, her quiet fears. Having someone sit beside her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, felt new and surprisingly comforting. The rain softened after about an hour. The thunder drifted farther away, rolling gently like distant waves. Clara stood and walked to the window, watching the drops fall more lightly. Jack joined her, standing just a few steps away, close enough for her to feel his presence, but not close enough to overwhelm her. "It's calming now," she whispered. "Storms always are when they're ending." Jack replied. They stood there for a long moment, watching the sky lighten a little. The smell of wet earth drifted in through a small crack in the window, fresh and peaceful. When Clara finally turned toward him, something had shifted between them. She could feel it, even if she couldn't name it. A closeness had formed, quiet, gentle, undeniable. Jack saw it too. He didn't rush it. He simply smiled at her, the kind of smile that held patience and promise. "Well," he said softly, "if you're ready, I can follow behind you in my truck. Make sure you get home safe." Clara nodded, touched by his care. "I'd like that." They walked out of the classroom together. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a small bloom of hope, opening softly inside her chest, and Jack, as he opened the door for her, felt something too, a quiet certainty that the long, careful steps they'd been taking were finally leading them closer to each other. In the days after the storm, Clara found herself thinking about that evening far more often than she expected. She remembered the soft rumble of thunder, the warm glow of the classroom lamps, and the comfort of Jack's steady presence beside her. She remembered how he had followed her car all the way to her house, just to make sure she reached home safely. And she remembered how, before he drove away, he had leaned out of his truck window and said, "If you ever need anything, you call me, all right?" It was a simple sentence, spoken softly, but it stayed with her like a gentle echo. Clara had always lived her life quietly. She never tried to draw attention or invite anyone too close. She kept her emotions tucked away, safe behind polite smiles and careful steps. But after that evening with Jack, she began to feel something inside her shift, like a window opening after being closed for too long. She found herself thinking about him during small, ordinary moments, while pouring her morning tea, while arranging books on her desk, while walking through the school hallway. She didn't admit it out loud, even to herself at first, but she missed him. On the ranch, Jack thought about her too. Whenever he rode out to check the fences or walk past the barn, he caught himself wondering how she was doing. Was her day peaceful? Did she laugh with her students? Did she ever think about him the way he thought about her? He wasn't used to being distracted like this. Ranch life demanded focus, and Jack usually gave it. But Clara had found her way into his thoughts in a soft, steady way that felt natural, like she had always belonged there. He wanted to see her again. Not for deliveries, not for chores, just to see her. But he didn't want to push too fast. Clara was gentle, like a small flame that needed careful hands. Jack didn't want to frighten her by showing up unannounced or speaking too boldly. So he found small reasons to go by the school more often. One morning, he stopped by to drop off a new bale of hay just in case the storm had ruined the last one. Another day, he dropped off a set of old books about horses, thinking her students might enjoy them. Clara accepted each visit with a warm smile, though she sometimes wondered if he truly needed to stop by or if he simply wanted to see her. And each time he left, her cheeks stayed warm long after the door closed. Clara also began allowing herself small changes that felt like gentle acts of courage. She wore her favorite dress more often, even if there was no special reason. She tied her hair with a ribbon instead of leaving it in a simple bun. She smiled a little more easily, laughed a little more freely, and let herself breathe in moments she once rushed through. She didn't transform to impress anyone. She simply let herself be softer, more open, more present, and Jack noticed every little change. One afternoon, he arrived at the schoolyard and found her standing outside near the pony barn. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, brushed by the breeze. She had a soft look on her face as she watched the ponies nibble at the grass. Jack stepped out of his truck slowly, not wanting to disturb the calm moment. "Afternoon, Clara," he said gently. She turned, surprised but happy to see him. "Jack, I wasn't expecting you today. Thought I'd check how the ponies handled the storm," he answered simply. Even though the ponies looked perfectly fine from the road, Clara smiled knowingly, but she didn't call him out on it. Instead, she said, "They're doing well. The children took such good care of them this morning." Jack stood beside her, their shoulders close but not touching. He watched the ponies for a moment before glancing at Clara. She looked peaceful, her face relaxed, her eyes warm. Jack felt something inside him shift, a quiet certainty that he wanted to be someone she trusted, someone she welcomed into her world. "You look happy today," Jack said softly. Clara felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "I've been trying to enjoy things a little more," she admitted. "Life feels different lately." "In a good way?" Jack nodded slowly. "I'm glad." There was a quiet moment between them, not empty, but full. Clara felt her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from something new, something hopeful. Over the next few weeks, their connection grew naturally. Jack stopped by the school whenever he could, and Clara no longer hid her smile when she saw him. Sometimes they walked around the playground together, talking about small things that somehow felt meaningful. Other times, they simply sat under the oak tree while the children played. Enjoying the quiet presence of each other, Clara began telling Jack things she rarely shared, her favorite childhood books. Her dream of one day starting a little reading club in the town. Her secret worry that she wasn't doing enough with her life. Jack listened with patience, offering thoughts when needed, but mostly letting her speak freely. Jack, too, shared parts of himself that he usually kept hidden, the long mornings on the ranch that made him feel grounded, the loneliness he sometimes felt at night, the pressure of keeping the family land running after his parents passed it down to him. Clara listened with the same gentle attention she gave her students. But this time her eyes held something deeper, something just for him. One evening, after a long day of classes, Clara found a small folded note tucked under the books on her desk. Her breath caught as she opened it. The handwriting was familiar and simple. "Stop by the barn after school if you want some fresh apples." Jack, her heart fluttered. It wasn't just an offer of apples. It was an invitation to step a little closer. She went. Jack was waiting near the pony barn, leaning casually against the fence with a basket beside him. When he saw her approaching, his expression softened into a smile that looked like it belonged only to her. "You came," he said quietly. "I did," she answered, her voice just as soft. They fed the ponies together, their hands sometimes brushing by accident. Each accidental touch felt like a spark, not overwhelming, just warm, like a lantern being lit inside them both. Clara found herself standing closer to him than she ever allowed before. Jack didn't move away. After a while, Jack cleared his throat gently. "Clara, can I ask you something?" She looked up at him, her heart steady and nervous all at once. "Of course. Are you comfortable spending time with me? I mean, more than just these small moments at the school?" Clara felt her breath catch. She looked down for a moment, gathering courage. When she lifted her eyes again, they held a quiet honesty. "Yes," she said. "I like spending time with you, Jack. More than I expected to." A soft relief washed over his face, mixing with something warm and hopeful. He took a small step closer, not too close, just enough to show he cared. "I'm glad," he said. "I've been wanting to ask for a while, but I didn't want to rush you." "You're not rushing me," Clara whispered. "I just move slowly." "That's all right," Jack replied. "I've got plenty of patience." Clara smiled, a soft smile that reached her eyes. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long while. She didn't feel judged for her quiet nature, her careful steps, or her gentle ways. Jack understood her. That understanding made her feel brave in a way she didn't know she could be. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Jack walked her to her car. He didn't touch her hand, though he wanted to. Instead, he offered her something just as meaningful, a promise spoken gently. "I'll be around," he said. "Whenever you want company?" Clara nodded slowly, her heart full. "I'd like that," she said. They didn't need anything more in that moment. The simple closeness between them, the soft smiles, the warm glances, the honest words was enough. Their relationship wasn't loud or rushed. It was growing in quiet curves of courage. It's the same way Clara herself was learning to open her heart. She still didn't dare call him first, but her presence, her soft laugh, her gentle confidence, they invited him forward anyway. The fundraiser night at the school was one of the biggest events of the year. Parents, teachers, and townspeople all gathered to support the children. Clara had planned the event for weeks, preparing games, arranging student performances, and decorating the gymnasium with colorful handmade banners. She wanted everything to be perfect, not just for the children, but because the school was the heart of the town. And though she didn't admit it out loud, she hoped Jack might come. She tried not to think about him too much that evening, tried not to look toward the doors every time they opened. She told herself she was being silly. He was busy with ranch work, and fundraisers weren't exactly events cowboys rushed to attend. Still, her heart had its own hopes. The gym buzzed with laughter and conversation. Children ran around excitedly, showing off their art projects. Parents chatted in small clusters. Music played softly from an old speaker in the corner. Everything felt warm and lively. Clara was helping a group of children organize a small reading corner when the room shook just slightly, but enough for her to feel it. A familiar voice spoke quietly near the entrance. She turned her head and froze for a heartbeat. Jack had walked in. He wasn't dressed fancy, just a clean shirt, neat jeans, and that calm expression he always carried, but he looked handsome in a simple, a steady way that made Clara's heart flutter. He scanned the room slowly until his eyes found hers. When they met, his smile grew soft and warm, like he had come for no other reason except to see her. Clara felt her breath catch, but she steadied herself. She didn't rush over. She finished helping the children, smoothing their books and making sure they were comfortable before walking across the room toward him. Her steps were careful, but confident. "You came," she said, her voice softer than she intended. Jack nodded. Wouldn't miss it, he said. You worked hard on this? Clara felt a shy warmth spread across her face. I wasn't sure you'd be able to make it. I made time, he replied simply. And the quiet meaning behind those words made her heart beat a little faster. They walked through the event together. Clara introduced him to a few parents, though her voice trembled slightly each time she said his name. Jack listened politely, shaking hands, offering small smiles. But whenever he caught Clara's eye, its expression softened in a way that made her feel seen. Later in the evening, the children performed a short play. Clara sat in the front row, and Jack took a seat beside her. Every now and then, he glanced her way, watching the way her eyes lit up when the children said their lines correctly, or how she laughed quietly at their dramatic gestures. It made him admire her even more. When the play ended and everyone clapped, Clara felt Jack's gaze linger on her for a moment longer than usual. She looked back, and something unspoken passed between them, a feeling that had been building for weeks. Now more certain than ever, after the crowd thinned and the event slowly wound down, Clara began gathering leftover papers, folding decorations, and stacking chairs. Most people had already gone home, leaving only a handful of volunteers behind. Jack stayed too, rolling up banners and carrying boxes without being asked. You don't have to help, Clara said gently. I know, he replied, but I want to. When the last chair was put away and the lights dimmed, they stepped outside together into the cool night air. The stars were bright above them, scattered across the wide sky like tiny lanterns. A soft breeze brushed past, lifting Clara's hair. They stood there quietly for a moment, neither rushing to speak. The night felt full of meaning, full of possibility, full of all the words they hadn't said. Jack turned to her. Clara, he said softly, tonight was wonderful. You did a fine job. Thank you, she murmured. It means a lot that you came. He hesitated for a second, as though searching for the right words. I didn't come just for the fundraiser, he admitted gently. I came to see you. Clara felt her heart squeeze. She took a small step back, not to run, but because her emotions were swirling too quickly. She had waited years for someone to say such words, yet now that they were spoken aloud, she didn't know how to respond immediately. Jack noticed her slight retreat, so he softened his tone. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, he said. You don't need to say anything right now. Claire looked up at him, her eyes filled with honesty. I'm not uncomfortable, she said quietly. I'm just not used to this. I know, Jack said. You take your time. I'll be here. Those words. The patience in them meant more to Clara than anything else. She felt a wave of emotion rise inside her. For years she had lived carefully, taking small steps, holding her feelings close. She never wanted to impose, never wanted to seem too eager or too hopeful. But standing under the quiet night sky beside Jack, she felt something brave stir inside her. Later that night, after she returned home, the bravery remained. She sat in her small living room, the fundraiser decorations still faintly glittering on her clothes, and thought about everything: his kindness, his steady presence, the way he waited for her, never rushing, never pushing. Her heart felt full, and for the first time, she didn't want to let fear decide her actions. She sat down, picked up her phone, and held it for a long moment. Her fingers trembled slightly. She had never called him before. She had always waited for life, for others, for a sign. But now she realized waiting had only ever kept her alone. She took a breath, then another. And then, with all the courage she could gather, she pressed his name. The phone barely rang once before Jack answered. Clara. His voice was warm, hopeful, concerned, and surprised all at once. She closed her eyes, letting the sound calm her. Jack, she whispered. I hope it's not too late to call. Not at all, he replied immediately. I'm glad you did. There was a long pause, not empty, but full of something new and tender. I wanted to say thank you, Clara continued softly. For tonight. For the other days. For everything. You don't have to thank me, he said gently. I'm just glad I get to be around you. Her heart fluttered again, but this time she didn't hide from it. I like being around you too, she whispered. Jack exhaled slowly as though he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Clara, he said softly, I've been hoping you'd say something like that. She smiled, small, shy, but honest. I think I'm ready to spend more time with you. If you still want to? I want to, he said. Very much. Clara leaned back in her chair, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She didn't feel scared anymore. She felt calm. She felt safe. She felt seen. And she felt hopeful in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. From that moment on, their relationship grew naturally, gently, and beautifully. They didn't rush. They didn't force anything. They let each step come at its own time. Clara learned that opening her heart wasn't dangerous. It was freeing. And Jack learned that the quietest people often love the deepest. Their story didn't happen in grand gestures or dramatic moments. It happened in soft conversations, shared smiles, slow walks, and brave little steps forward. And it all began with one simple call Clara never dared to make before, but finally did when she found her courage. The schoolmarm who once kept her heart locked away discovered that love could grow gently, quietly, and beautifully. And the cowboy who waited patiently found that her gentle nature had invited him from the very beginning. Their lives, once separate, slowly intertwined not with noise, but with warmth, and in that warm, steady love, they found something that felt like home.